Great. So actually, first order of business is I wanted the people to, and I think it's important that they get to know you as a writer, right? So, and again, you write on a variety of genres, right? Fantasy, comedy. Actually, yes, I have children's books, comedy, nonfiction, fiction, right? So it's clear that storytelling is one of your many talents, right? Actually, I saw some videos. I could make comments on the other talents, and you're climbing the walls and all sorts of things. You're very talented. But it seems to me one underlying characteristic of your work is this ability to find meaning and actually, foster connections, identify connections. So I'd like to ask you, so how do you see your role? So what is your mission as a writer? So why do you write?
I think there are multiple reasons that I write, and it probably depends on quite what I'm writing about. So, in some ways, I write because I want to help people understand things. You know, the biggest thing for me, and this is partially an autistic thing, but also just something some people have, which is the seeking of understanding of things. Like it's really, really super important what truths are out there, and you know that's something that really, really drives me. But there's also the sharing of things. Like, so one of the things I mentioned in the TEDx, which segues into a lot of what you and Jen were talking about, is that we seek meaning usually through sharing stories. You know, the sharing of stories is essentially where kind of me becomes we, and you know we can talk about how stories become assemblages and all sorts of things, but the the drive behind it is kind of the seeking of meaning and the sharing of meaning. So stories can be used as very factual kind of narratives of events, but they can also be used as parables. They can be used as ways of, you know, subtly giving meaning to other people. So part of it's exploration, part of it's understanding, part of it's sharing, and part of it is a way to also allow flow. Like flow is a very important thing to me. I mean, I play a few instruments and whatever, not particularly well, I must admit. And there's kind of that idea of the muse for the creative, for the artist. And it's a way of almost exploring how creativity isn't always created and constructed. Sometimes it flows and you're more of a conduit. So all of those things are really important to me.
So I didn't think of you as a musician. So maybe I have to think about more questions about your musical talent. So maybe you should upload some of those videos. So we often talk about the importance of reading, and I wanted to address that specifically with you. So at a very early age, you were exposed to a great variety of fantasy books, and you talk quite a lot about that. You're reading about fantasy books at a very early age. So to what extent those immersive realities, or fantasy worlds or fantastic worlds, they really helped mold your personality and mold or help define the writer that you became?
I think that it was fundamental to a lot of what I do and a lot of how I see the world. And I think, again, you know, I was diagnosed autistic fairly late, actually fairly recently. So I knew quite a lot about neurodiversity, and I probably always suspected that there was some there. Quite clearly there is. Um, so for me, one of the most important aspects of it was escapism. I didn't fit anywhere with anyone, and so perhaps I was seeking places where I might fit better, or at least, you know, experience different places um, where other things could be, you know, the case. So, but there's also the element, and Zen touched on this earlier, which is that the world building element. Like, I'm fascinated by how people can create what isn't, essentially, you know, make these things almost reality that aren't. So it's that idea of um, you know, bringing in worlds from all of Terry Pratchett's books to kind of stuff like Neil Gaiman, to some of the sci-fi elements, which are almost reimagining the world. And this is where we start that kind of, and I thought this when Zen said it earlier, the fuzzy liminality kind of aspect of between fabulation and fiction. I think there's definitely overlap there, and that it was a way for me to share stories that really mattered. And when I realized that I had a lot of things that I wanted to share, that was when I kind of started thinking, well, actually, I would like to write. So as early as 13, I was writing I was writing earlier than that, but that's when I really started. And in fact, my first chapter in my kind of main fantasy series is more or less, it's slightly better now, but it's more or less unchanged from when I was 14. And that was kind of a homage to my English teacher at the time, who really encouraged me.